In the deep heart of Zululand, the afternoon sun of January 22nd beat down with an unforgiving intensity. A profound sense of dread was creeping across the parched landscape, a silent harbinger of the storm to come. Just hours earlier, the British Empire had suffered one of its most catastrophic defeats at the Battle of Isandlwana. A wave of victorious Zulu warriors, thousands strong, had annihilated a modern British army. Now, a contingent of that same Zulu army, the Undi Corps, turned its sights on a small, vulnerable outpost. This was the mission station and supply depot of Rorke's Drift, a humble collection of buildings by the Buffalo River. It was manned by a skeleton force, a mere handful of red-coated soldiers from the 24th Regiment of Foot. Command fell unexpectedly to Lieutenant John Chard of the Royal Engineers, a man of blueprints and bridges, not battles. Alongside him was Lieutenant Gonville Bromhead, a man plagued by partial deafness but possessing a quiet, unyielding resolve. Garrison was a motley crew of about 150 men, including colonial troops and hospital patients. Suddenly, two exhausted horsemen appeared on the horizon, riding frantically towards the drift. They were survivors from Isandlwana, their faces etched with the horror of what they had witnessed. They brought the terrifying news. The Zulus were coming, and they were coming in force. A chilling debate ensued: stand and fight, or attempt a retreat that would surely be suicidal. Commissary James Dalton, a former soldier with a keen tactical mind, argued passionately for making a stand. The decision was made. They would fortify the station and face the coming onslaught. A frantic energy seized the men as they began to construct a perimeter of defense. Heavy bags of mealie corn, weighing over 200 pounds each, were heaved into place. Wooden biscuit boxes, large and cumbersome, were piled high to form makeshift walls. Two large wagons were incorporated into the barricade, their heavy frames providing solid anchors. The men worked with a desperate urgency, their sweat mingling with the dust of the compound. The hospital building and the storehouse were loopholed, turning windows into deadly firing positions. Every man knew that this thin, jagged line of bags and boxes was all that stood between them and annihilation. Around 4:20 p.m., the lookout on the roof gave the dreaded cry. A vast, dark mass appeared on the distant hills, moving with a terrifying, fluid grace. It was the Zulu Impi, a sea of black shields and gleaming spear points. The sound began as a low rumble, the stamping of thousands of feet on the hard earth. Then it grew into a war cry, a chilling chant that seemed to shake the very air. The first wave of about 600 warriors broke from the main body and charged the south wall. Chard's order rang out, sharp and clear. Fire! First volley from the Martini Henry rifles crashed out, a deafening roar of controlled power. The lead ranks of the Zulu charge faltered, men stumbling and falling under the hail of lead. But more warriors surged forward, their courage seemingly endless. They pressed right up to the barricades, seeking to overwhelm the defenders with sheer numbers. The fighting became a desperate, intimate struggle of bayonet against assegai. Red-coated soldiers stood shoulder to shoulder, a thin line of discipline against a tide of fury. Meanwhile, another large Zulu force swept around to attack the hospital on the northern side. This building was defended by a handful of men, its many windows and doors a significant liability. The Zulus swarmed around the verandas, trying to force their way inside. The defenders inside fought from room to room, the crack of their rifles echoing in the confined spaces. Suddenly, a new terror emerged. The thatched roof of the hospital was on fire. Choking smoke began to fill the wards where the wounded lay helpless. A desperate evacuation began under the most horrific conditions imaginable. Private John Williams and his comrades began hacking through the flimsy interior walls with a pickaxe. One by one, they dragged the patients from their beds and through the small, jagged holes. Private Alfred Henry Hook held the doorway to their room, fighting off Zulus with his bayonet. The hospital became an inferno, the flames lighting up the night sky with a ghastly, flickering glow. The loss of the hospital forced the defenders to pull back to a smaller, final perimeter around the storehouse. This final bastion was a small rectangle of mealie bags, a last island of defiance. The Zulus, illuminated by the burning hospital, launched relentless attacks throughout the night. They used the cover of the outer barricades to get close, firing rifles taken from the dead at Isandlwana. The British defenders, exhausted and running low on ammunition, had to conserve every shot. Surgeon James Reynolds moved tirelessly among the wounded, tending to their injuries under constant fire. The air was thick with the smell of smoke, gunpowder, and blood. Corporal William Allen ensured the men were supplied with cartridges, bravely running from man to man. The battle for the cattle kraal was particularly vicious, a swirling melee in the darkness. For 12 long hours, the small garrison held its ground against impossible odds. As the first hints of dawn approached, the intensity of the Zulu attacks began to wane. The final shots sputtered out around 4:00 a.m., replaced by an eerie, ringing silence. The surviving defenders, blackened by smoke and utterly spent, peered over their barricades. In the growing light, they saw that the Zulu army was gone. The ground before them was littered with the bodies of hundreds of fallen Zulu warriors. They had paid a terrible price for their bravery, a testament to their unwavering courage. The British had suffered 17 killed and 15 wounded, a heavy toll for the small force. Later that morning, the British relief column under Lord Chelmsford finally arrived. They were stunned into silence by the scene of utter devastation and the evidence of the epic struggle. The defense of Rorke's Drift became a legend, a beacon of heroism in a dark chapter of the war. An unprecedented 11 Victoria Crosses were awarded to the defenders for their incredible bravery. Lieutenants Shot and Bromhead, the unlikely commanders, were among those honored with the highest award for valor. The story of their stand would be told and retold, a timeless testament to the human spirit's capacity for courage and resilience. The sun rose higher, casting its light on the silent, scarred battlefield. Every broken spear and spent cartridge told a story of the night's desperate fight. The surviving soldiers began the grim task of tending to their wounded comrades. A sense of profound exhaustion hung over the garrison, heavier than the morning mist. The river flowed on, a silent witness to the carnage that had unfolded on its banks. The courage of the Zulu warriors had been immense, a fact not lost on the defenders. They had charged into a storm of fire, armed with little more than spears and conviction. The defense had relied on the rapid, disciplined fire of the Martini Henry rifle. Each soldier had been drilled to fire quickly and accurately, a skill that saved their lives. The redoubt of biscuit boxes became a symbol of their ingenuity in the face of crisis. Private Frederick Hitch, though severely wounded, passed out ammunition until he could no longer move. The battle was a brutal lesson in the effectiveness of entrenched defenders against a frontal assault. The light of the burning hospital, while terrifying, had also prevented the Zulus from using the darkness to their advantage. The defenders' world had shrunk to the narrow space behind their barricades. Every shadow could have hidden a warrior. Every sound was a potential threat. The shared danger forged an unbreakable bond between the men of the garrison. They were Welsh, English, Irish, and colonial. But that night, they were simply brothers in arms. The story of Rorke's Drift provided a stark contrast to the failure of command at Isandlwana. Here, junior officers had shown initiative and an iron will to survive. The quiet heroism of men like Corporal Ferdinand Schiess of the native contingent was also recognized. The battle would be studied by military tacticians for generations to come. But for the men who were there, it was not about tactics or glory. It was about survival, about protecting the man next to you. It was about facing down an overwhelming fear and finding a strength you never knew you possessed. The silence of the morning was a profound relief, a stark contrast to the cacophony of battle. The defenders took their first full breaths of air not laced with gunpowder. Water was passed around, soothing throats raw from shouting and smoke. The physical cost was immense, with bruises, cuts, and burns on nearly every man. But the psychological scars would last a lifetime, etched into their memories. The makeshift barricades, now battered and stained, had held firm. Each bag and box was a testament to their desperate, frantic labor. The arrival of the relief column was met not with cheers, but with quiet, weary relief. Lord Chelmsford, the commander-in-chief, could scarcely believe what the small garrison had achieved. The news of their victory would send a shockwave of pride and relief throughout the British Empire. It was a story of the common soldier, the enlisted man who finds greatness in the crucible of combat. The defense was a masterpiece of improvisation and sheer grit. The Zulus had shown a different kind of valor, one of massed, disciplined courage. Their withdrawal was not a rout, but an organized retreat, leaving the British to ponder their narrow escape. The names of Chard, Bromhead, and Dalton would become immortalized in military history. But the victory belonged to every man who held the line that night. From the surgeon to the private, each had played his vital part. The legacy of Rorke's Drift is a complex one, a tale of imperial conflict and incredible human drama. It remains a powerful story of how ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things under pressure. The heat of the day began to build again, but the fever of battle had finally broken. A lone soldier leaned against the barricade, his helmet off, looking towards the distant hills. The cattle in the kraal, which had been a point of contention, were now quiet. The world had been reduced to this small patch of ground, and they had held it. The officers began to take stock, compiling a list of the living and the dead. Each name represented a world of loss, a family who would receive terrible news. Bravery of the hospital defenders had saved 9 lives from the inferno. Their actions were a small beacon of hope in the midst of the slaughter. The discipline of the 24th Regiment had been tested to its absolute limit. They had not broken, they had bent, retreated, and held. The Zulus had fought with a ferocity that commanded respect from their foes. Their tactics were sophisticated, probing for any weakness in the British line. The use of fire had been a terrifyingly effective psychological weapon. But the stone walls of the storehouse had provided a solid, fireproof anchor for the defense. The battle was a story written in sweat, blood, and gunpowder. For the survivors, the world would never look the same again. They had stood on the edge of the abyss and refused to fall. The legend of Rorke's Drift was born in the fire and smoke of that January night. The quiet of the morning was the sound of improbable survival. The men moved slowly, their bodies aching with a profound weariness. The shared experience had forged them into a single, resilient unit. They had faced the finest warriors of the Zulu kingdom and held their ground. The cost of victory was written on the face of every survivor. The battle was over, but its echoes would resonate through history.